Francisco d'Ancona.
Watching, we know you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Face to Face with me, Syed Ali. It's been 50 years since the death of Malcolm X, and my guest today, Fahad Ansari, a human rights solicitor, believes that the Muslims of today in the UK are facing the same struggles as those of the blacks at the height of the civil rights movement. Fahad Ansari, welcome to Face to Face.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Are Muslims being oppressed in the UK?
Well, it depends on what you define as oppression. If we categorize what's happening to the Muslims in the UK, then I'll lead people to come to their own conclusion about whether that constitutes oppression or not. So at the moment we have over 10 pieces of anti-terror legislation in the UK, which is almost exclusively being used against Muslims in the UK. We have Muslims being detained without charge. Muslims being put under terrorism preventative measures or control orders, where they are placed under house arrest, where they're not allowed to walk outside their home more than 1 mile or 5 miles, where they can't possess electronic devices, where their children have to have their friends vetted before they come to visit. We have Muslims whose children are being taken into care based on secret evidence that they can't challenge in court, all under the guise of fighting extremism, which is, again, undefined, that even the Home Secretary can't define it. Now,
But surely that's justifiable post 9/11, post 7/7.
well, not necessarily. What's justifiable after 7/7 and 9/11 is to go after terrorists. What's happening is the net has been drawn so wide that you're going after the 3 million Muslims in this country, all who are being targeted because of their belief and their practice in Islam. So if all of this is what would be defined as oppression, and obviously we're not talking about hard oppression as in places like Syria or Yemen or these places, but let's call this soft oppression, where we're being treated as second-class citizens, where we're being treated not with the same rights that other members of society have. I don't think anybody can actually reasonably say that we are being treated equally with our citizens of other faiths and of no faith.
But when we have the situation of Lee Rigby in the UK, when we've had other atrocities being carried out in the UK from people who claim to be from the Muslim community, then maybe it is right for our security services to protect the citizens of this country.
The difficulty with that argument is that there's many atrocities and many crimes committed in the UK every day, majority by people who are not Muslims. We don't hear about them. They are reported in the media, but when the perpetrators are not of the Muslim faith, their faith is not mentioned. Whereas where a criminal commits an act, and we have criminals in Islamic society, wherever country you go to, but where they carry out the attack in the UK, their religion is mentioned, which gives the perception that the problem is about Islam and with Muslims, but that's not the issue. Fight crime, don't fight the religion. So the Lee Rigby incident, it was a murder, and it was prosecuted as a murder. It was a stabbing. Knife crime is rampant in London, and most of it is committed by non-Muslims. But we still don't have that huge debate about let's go after their children, let's go after the music they listen to, let's go after the videos they watch, let's go after the discussions they have in their youth clubs. We don't have that targeting of their community the way we have with Islam. So yes, there have these atrocities have been committed by people who identify themselves as Muslims. But if we actually want to tackle the problem, let's listen to the reasons those people are giving. The reasons those
What
people,
are those reasons?
Well, the reasons that the 7/7 bombers, the reasons that the Michael Adebayo, who killed Lee Rigby, the reasons the 9/11 bombs in New York said, all of them talked about foreign policy, the unethical foreign policy that has resulted in the slaughter and oppression of hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So let's tackle that. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room. And even like modern day terrorism experts, non-Muslims, academics, they all talk about the fact that this theory that terrorism is motivated by ideology, by whether that be religious or political ideology, is false. It's motivated, and the cause of it is social and political. And unless those factors are tackled, then anyone will find an ideology that can actually push them that extra step to commit acts of terrorism.
We've heard these kind of narratives. We've heard these stories before that it is foreign policy that is motivating these young people to go fight overseas that are committing extremism. But why isn't that listened to by a government?
We have to look at what's in the national interest. Now, if any government, you'll have to put your question to the government. All we can do is we can highlight the problem. Now, the government flatly refuses to even acknowledge this. So all of these criminals who carried out these attacks, they came out and they said, they didn't say this is because Allah and His Messenger told us to do this. They didn't say this is because of the madrasa we went to. This is because the gym we went to. This is because our Quran tells us to do this.
Yeah.
No,
or the mosque they're attending.
All the mosques they're attending. All they came out with, they talked about, you are killing Muslims in Muslim lands. So until they are safe, you won't be safe in your land. That's foreign policy.
Is it not the ideology's fault, rather than what's happening overseas?
What's the ideology? Islam? If it was the ideology...
a specific strand of Islam, not necessarily all of Islam.
Well, the problem is that they're not attacking a specific strand. They're attacking Islam.
Yeah.
So they're equating Islamic practice with terrorism. If there was any truth in this statement that Islam is the cause of terrorism, then there would be a huge problem in this world, because Muslims make up 1/5 of the world's population. And in this country alone, you would have 3 million terrorists. 3 million. Just imagine the situation if there was 3 million. If there was any truth in that argument, it'd be finished. It'd be a war zone in this country.
So all of the Muslim population of the UK are being targeted by these new laws and legislations. 3 million Muslims.
I'll give you.
Or is it just some small people who've been vetted, who have some kind of aspirations to do some extremist activities in this country?
No, I think the net is cast too wide. I'll give you an example. There was a sister in Manchester recently who went to pick up her son from nursery, a 4-year-old. When she got to nursery, she was surprised to see a police officer there, and she was told that the police had been called because the 4-year-old son was quite excited, saying that he's going to his cousin's house to play with guns, with toy guns. Any other child who was not a Muslim who went to play toy guns, they would basically all be wrong. They sell them in the shops for a reason, for boys, girls to play with. So if a boy is saying that, and suddenly because he's a Muslim, he's never had any issues before, suddenly the police are called in to interrogate a 4-year-old boy.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that...
But surely that's an isolated incident.
I wish it
doesn't
was.
happen everywhere
Saeed,
all the time.
Yeah, I wish it was. In the last 3 or 4 months, I get contacted at least once every week by a parent telling me about these incidents, similar incidents. People who have used the word, for example, that sister whose son used the word eco-terrorist in a class, and suddenly had been interrogated about ISIS. So these kind of cases are cropping up more and more, commonly. So children who don't celebrate Christmas, for example, they're being taken in as possibly their parents are extremists. And unfortunately, this isn't just coming from teachers. The guidance has been coming down from the top level. So the Metropolitan Police, Mac Chisti, the highest Muslim officer in the police force, he said a few months ago that one of the indicators of radicalization is that children, they develop adverse attitudes towards alcohol and socializing with people of the opposite gender. They boycott Marks and Spencer. They don't celebrate Christmas, or they believe it's haram to celebrate Christmas. Are any of these ideas... should these lead to extremism? Should these lead to terrorism? Of course they don't. And the boycott and divestment sanctions movement is a huge national campaign with people from all over the different faiths, no faith, everyone's involved in it.
Yeah.
Yet, if a Muslim is suddenly involved in that, they are being reported as extremists. So you are carrying on doing everyday activities. You're politically engaged with the system. You're trying to address political issues, engage with the system, engage with politics, and because of your Muslim faith, that is highlighted as a possibility that you could be an extremist. Yeah, that's wrong. What is that going to do?
Yeah.
Where are you going to drive the discussions? So let's say people, when the Paris attack happened, the president...
But we're constantly hearing, if Muslims do this, this will happen because we're Muslims. But is that really the case? Is it because you're a Muslim? Are you playing this victim card too often?
It's not about playing a victim card, right? It's about highlighting the injustices that are happening. Okay, so we can't keep our heads in the sand and say everything is okay.
Yeah.
Now, we need to identify. I don't believe in just putting out stories of Islamophobia and saying we're victims. I don't think it's healthy for any community or healthy society for that to happen. I think, and that's one of the things that Malcolm X quite rightly did, was that he talked about challenging that mentality and challenging the oppression. It's not enough just to say, look what's happening to us. It's about what steps we're going to take to challenge that and overcome that oppression.
I mean, he would, Malcolm X, you've quoted quite a lot of times in your article, he would say, we need to get our rights back by any means necessary. Is that what you would stand for? How do we get our rights back?
I think by any means necessary is obviously open to interpretation.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that I have to be very careful what I say now is indicative of the fact that, people can be arrested for saying by any means necessary today. Malcolm X was in this studio today and he said that statement, he would probably be arrested. Yeah,
but another thing that you've alluded to, Muslims are afraid to speak up for themselves, to speak for their rights. Why do they have this fear? They're not living in a dictatorship, are they?
They don't live in a dictatorship, but what they do live in is in a country where whatever you say will be used against you. Yeah. And not necessarily in a court of law. So, for example, people, if your name is John Smith, you're a Catholic, and you criticize the UK intervention in Syria, and you allude to the fact that this might lead to repercussions within the UK, that ISIS might strike back, and that as a direct consequence of that bombing. That's okay. That's you engaging with the system using political reasoning. If your name is Syed Ali and you say that exact same argument, you will be called an apologist. You'll be called someone who is threatening national security. If the fact that the Prime Minister of this country can label the opposition leader a threat to national security and an apologist for terrorism because he was opposed to the bombing of Syria, that should tell you a lot about, when it comes to Muslims who have those views, what he regards us, what kind of terms he probably uses for Muslims. So free speech is here, we can use it, but there will be repercussions. Your teenagers can talk about foreign policy, but the extremism guidance says that if they do so, that could be a sign that they're on the conveyor belt to becoming terrorists.
Okay, I think that's a very good answer, but which will lead us to our other question.
Okay.
You equate weakness and submission to the Muslim community. How far should the Muslim community go in bringing about their rights? Okay, by any means necessary?
I don't equate weakness and submission with the Muslim community. I don't think that's a correct assessment of what.
But they're fearful. They don't.
I think we are in a position of weakness at the moment. In fact, the Muslim community is an incredible community. It's strong. It's vibrant. It's positive. I think we're going through a very difficult period, but the amount of success stories in this period itself is enough to inspire anybody. I think we need to do more. We need to try to reclaim those rights that have been taken away from us.
But how do we reclaim those rights? That's the question.
The question, I think everybody needs to engage in some way. At a minimal level, everybody needs to at least know what's going on. If you are not aware of what's happening and you've got your head in the sand, then how are you going to bring about change? Every single one of us should be trying to bring about change in our own way. Whether that's from behind our PC, whether it's out in the street, whether it's within the organizations we're working with, wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you need to use that position Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you to bring back rights to the community.
But in the examples that you've brought about in your article on Malcolm X was an extremist, wasn't he?
Malcolm, I don't believe Malcolm.
He said he was an angry man. That you have to make noise.
Okay. Is that an extremist?
An
angry man who makes noise.
But he said he was an extremist in his own words.
Let's work. No, he said, and if I recall the quote correctly, is that the black community is in extremely bad position. So find me a black man who's not an extremist, and I'll show you basically someone who needs psychological treatment. So he was actually responding to the allegations that he's an extremist. I don't think he's accepting he's an extremist. I think similarly, we don't know what an extremist is. We don't have a definition by the government. Theresa May was on the Today Show earlier this year, and she couldn't actually identify. John Humphreys put her on the spot. What define extremist? She couldn't do it. Now, if the person and the responsible for drafting this legislation that is describing people as extremists can't define it, then who am I to say someone's an extremist or not?
But we have a community in Young West who are terrified to speak up. Okay, what should they be doing in terms of getting back their rights?
I'll tell you something. I think, thankfully, almost like as an indirect effect of broadening that net to take in everybody, people are waking up now, and people are seeing the reality of Prevent, or seeing the reality of the counter-terrorism laws, that it's not about terrorists, it's not about jihadists, it's not about Wahhabis or Salafis. It's affecting everybody. And I think as soon as you're affected, as soon as you've got that intervention, you realize, oh, what's going on? I was meant to be safe from all of this. I wasn't mixing with those people or those people. But now suddenly what's happening is, hold on, this is because of my hijab. This is because I believe homosexuality is wrong. This is because I didn't celebrate Christmas. And you're realizing that, hold on, I need to speak up. And it is affecting more people. More and more people are being impacted, so more people are now speaking out and realizing. And I think that's a good first step. Now, and how just go back to your original question, how do we actually take the next step? I think people are doing that naturally. People are raising awareness. And once you conquer that fear, you get over that barrier that I can't speak out or something will happen to me. Once they conquer that, and really and truly, once they come for you, once they've come for your kids, once they've intervened, that fear sort of dissipates because you realize that the worst thing they could have done to you, they've done. And after that, it's your turn to now fight back.
Isn't the problem the lack of effective Muslim leadership amongst the Muslim community, rather than Prevent, counter-terrorism legislations, and any other legislation against the Muslim community?
Well, what you have identified is definitely a huge problem, leadership. But I don't think that if we had effective leadership, we'd still have those other problems, but we'd be in a better position to tackle them.
Yeah, but because you say in your article, you equate hikmah or wisdom with submission and weakness. We're submitting to these legislations.
I don't equate hikmah. I think what I've said is that
the hikmah of our leaders today.
I've said many of our community leaders equate hikmah with submission and weakness, and just compromising on their beliefs, wanting to apologize about everything, saying this is hikmah. And that's what I disagree with, because that leads, that as much as talking daily about Islamophobia leads to victimhood. So where something happens in a different country thousands of miles away, by people who might share our religion, we are being told to apologize, put out newspaper advertisements saying we condemn. Continuously being asked to condemn and apologize for things that have nothing to do with us.
What's wrong with apologizing?
You apologize, ask a child what's wrong with apologizing for something they didn't do.
Because many would say, especially in the non-Muslim community, that the Muslim community aren't speaking up against terrorism or anything that happens in this country. They're not condemning these kind of atrocities. I mean, so what's wrong with apologizing? Shouldn't we be more vocal about these things?
We're being asked, our deen requires us to be enjoying the good, forbid the evil, without a shadow of a doubt. And we do that. We do that of our own volition. We do that because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to do that.
Yeah.
But what we're doing is we're doing it because the Daily Mail is telling us to, or David Cameron is telling us to. So we won't speak out about the massacre of Muslims in the Central African Republic. We won't condemn that. But we'll condemn atrocities carried out in Paris because the media are telling us to, or the politicians are telling us to. Why should we have to do? We have nothing to do with it. We have nothing to do with the Holocaust. We have nothing to do with the massacre in the Central African Republic.
Why should they be telling you to do it? Should you not do it instinctively?
Well, why should we do it? It's nothing to do with us. And by apologizing for it, you're accepting responsibility for it. Okay? So why should I apologize for something done in another country by somebody who just shares my religion but carried out an attack? There's a Muslim who robbed a bar of chocolate. There's a Muslim who raped a woman in Bradford. There's a Muslim who just didn't go to school today.
But even for the sake of quelling suspicion.
That suspicion shouldn't be there in the first place. Do you think that if we keep apologizing and condemning, what does that do? That equates you with what happened. So just like I don't expect normal Jewish people to apologize for the atrocities committed by the Jewish state, Israel, the self-proclaimed Jewish state, in the name of Judaism, in the name of science, I don't expect them to apologize. I don't expect my Hindu colleagues to apologize for massacres committed against Muslims in India. I don't expect the Buddhist shopkeeper down the road to apologize over the slaughter of Rohingya Muslims in Burma. I don't expect them to do that. They had nothing to do with it. They're free of that. If they start coming to me and say, I'm really sorry, I'll look at them a bit funny. I'll say, why are you sorry? Do you have something to do with it? Likewise, if I apologize, people are going to think the same thing, that I have something to do with this. It's nothing to do with me. Atrocities are happening by people of all faiths and no faith across the world every single day. And people are not expected to apologize. The only people who are expected to apologize are Muslims. So fine, I will apologize for Paris, but I will also apologize for the Israeli slaughter in Gaza.
But should you not be doing? Should you not be doing something to tackle the problems that the Muslim community are facing?
Good.
I mean, should you be waiting for an incident to happen, where you have to be waiting for the media to tell you to apologize?
Syed, this is fantastic, because prior to ISIS becoming on the world stage and being a threat to everyone, who were the people who were tackling ISIS? It was the Muslims. Who were the victims of ISIS? The Muslims of Syria. And it was ourselves, and I'm talking about myself and working in my capacity with Cage, we were the ones who were actually working against ISIS. There was people who were getting fatwa, people who were working behind the scenes to negotiate the releases of captives of Alan Henning, people on the ground in Syria. At that moment, so many people are working against ISIS, working towards the cause to protect the Muslims from them. But those people end up being locked up. Those people end up being gagged, being, oppressed.
But what are you doing to stop from another Emwazi?
Another Emwazi?
Yeah.
Is it my job to stop an Emwazi?
But you're part of this community. You
Yes.
belong to a community. Instead of waiting for the media to pick on you later on when an Emwazi does something overseas, should you not be doing something within this community to tackle that?
What do we do on a daily basis? What do? We get people to fight for the rights in a legitimate ways. So if you are in, and ironically, this is what Cage did with Emwazi. They actually got him to engage with the IPCC, to come and engage with this politician. They got him to use these resources available for him here. And when those were all shut down, and then he doesn't excuse, obviously, what he did, but he felt he had no choice but to leave the country. But what we try to do is get people to channel their energies through the existing mechanisms that are available in this country. And I think that when you shut that avenue of debate down, when you say, if you're engaging in this system, if you're speaking out against oppression, you're an extremist, keep those ideas shut. Where are they going to go? Where are these people going to go? When my kids can't speak about what they're worried about the Muslim world, they can't openly speak about this at school or in madrasa or in the masjid or with their parents. Who's going to influence them with the ideas? Where are they going to go? And that's the problem with this whole strategy. You are clamping down on people being able to engage controversial ideas and defeat controversial ideas with better ideas. Instead, you're saying don't even bring up the controversial idea.
Okay, then in that case, maybe I will ask you this question. Where lies the hikmah? Where lies the wisdom? What should Muslims be doing in this country?
Muslims should be speaking out. Muslims should be engaging, not on their terms. We should be engaging on our terms, not on those dictated to us. So when Muslims when we want to speak about Guantanamo Bay, for example, where there's still over 100 detainees, some been there for over 15 years, when we want to talk about that, we shouldn't be told, why are you talking about that issue? Look what happened in Paris. No, we'll talk about Paris. We'll condemn that. Of course we will. It's nothing to do with our deen. Where something is wrong, manifestly wrong, we speak out against it. But what we expect is that, take it at face value. If we don't condemn it, it doesn't mean that we condone it. But where we do speak out about issues, I think we need to be more proactive. We need to be, what really hikmah is talking about the greatness of this ummah. That is something that's missing from the debate. All the time we're hearing about Muslims having to apologize, condemn, and Muslims being victims of attacks. We need to move on from this narrative and talk about the positive aspects of this ummah, the greatness of the ummah, because psychologically that will make a huge difference to us.
But the
That's
challenge,
hikmah.
but the challenge remains: who speaks for the Muslim community? Who is this we that we're talking about?
You and I. You speak for the Muslim community, I speak for the Muslim community. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not ask me about my leader, He's going to ask me about me. He's going to ask you, Syed, about you. So what you do is when you're in public, when you're speaking, when you meet, it doesn't have to be on the BBC or Newsnight or on Sky. When you're in a public platform with your colleagues at work, when you're outside in the street in a dawah stall, when you're going and you're meeting the shopkeeper in the street, you are a representative of Islam. And what you do by your actions, by your behavior, by you showing a confident, positive Muslim identity, that will do more to tackling Islamophobia. So we had the brothers from One Nation recently. They were at Cumbria and they were cleaning up the flooding there. And that had a huge impact that even non-Muslims were texting them saying, you know, what you did changed our complete perception of Islam that we had.
Yeah, and on that positive
That's
note,
hikmah.
and on that positive hikmah note, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Fahad Ansari, for joining us on this episode of Face to Face. We really appreciate you for joining us. And dear viewers, thank you also for joining us on this episode of Face to Face. If you want to hear more about or know more about the subject that we were talking about today, feel free to visit our website. Until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.